Alright, Avengers Spotlight 30 featuring Hawkeye getting shot. I have a point to make with this video. I believe that this story is inadvertently what broke Hawkeye. This is what did summit with Hawkeye that unfortunately set up what Hawkeye solo stories would only be afterwards. Unintentionally, I believe, or like to believe, it was unintentional. This is by Steve Gerber, Al Milburn, and Bossman Eck. Edited by Marky Mark G. So I'll lay the cards out on the table. I am inclined to believe that what this story does wasn't meant to break the character. I think that the idea wasn't communicated well, and the execution did not make that point clear enough. Anyway, we have got Hawkeye and Mockingbird here, so let's piss off people wanting to hear about this comic by talking about other comics. This was released at the time of the evil Charlotte Witch saga, Jason Byrne's final issues on West Coast Avengers. There are some serious placement issues presented later on, but until we get to that scene, the biggest thing is that Hawkeye and Mockingbird were mentoring the Great Lakes Avengers at this point, and they don't even get a name drop in the issue. Hawkeye and Mockingbird are just back in LA. We waste zero time getting straight to the plot. The pair witness one of those famous drive-by shootings, and hysterically everyone but the two of them are gunned down. Now this is a Hawkeye story. It is told across multiple issues of Avengers Spotlight. In this one, it is the full issue, but the next parts are sharing space with U.S.Agent B stories. I quite like that setup. It's maybe the best balance Avengers Spotlight manages to hit, but I'll talk about that more in the next parts. This is a Hawkeye solo story, but what I love is that Hawkeye still interacts with others. Hawkeye as a character has always been defined by being part of the Avengers, and so it makes more sense that the thing that is a big part of his life does seep into his solo stories a lot. In this case, the big thing is that Mockingbird is very present throughout this story. She never steals attention away from Hawkeye, but we get some good writing of her and their relationship. And her inclusion, as I just said, it makes sense. Avengers Spotlight, formerly known as Solo Avengers, nearly always had Hawkeye as one of the featured stars. He was the most popular Avengers character without a solo title. But the problem was, at the time the series launched, he was leading a team of Avengers, and the truth is, Hawkeye doesn't, or has rarely ever had, a life separate from the team. What this book did was quite generic superhero adventures with Hawkeye. There's no wrong with that. But they don't make for great Hawkeye stories, because a big part of Hawkeye is the team and his friendships. even just his interactions with his teammates. Hawkeye had a miniseries before, written and penciled by the editor of this issue, Marky Mark G. And even that went about doing a solo Hawkeye story by pairing him with another character, Mockingbird, who he then married. And that brings us straight back to this issue. Hawkeye and Mockingbird, they chase after the gang that killed all those people. And this is far removed from what Hawkeye is typically going up against. Mockingbird, she has an espionage background, which they bring up. And it gives her a bit more experience in this kind of crime. But the rawness of it, it's Hawkeye. He's not used to this kind of thing. The real world street crime, it isn't his standard opponent. He deals with supervillains and saving people. He feels powerless when he experiences a crowd of innocent people randomly gunned down in public by a gang. In 1987, DC revitalised their Ara character by shifting the tone towards grittier stories about urban crime, with Ara battling drug dealers and the like. Ara had always been notably rooted in that sort of thing though. He had always been politicised and socially conscious. His time with the Justice League was often him decrying the rest of the League for turning a blind eye to smaller injustices on Earth. His origin further cements these ideas. Ara was a rich philanthropist who became aware of the struggles of the underclass, and he chose to champion and fight for them. He fought on behalf of the have-nots because he had been one of the haves. Other than base level similarities, Hawkeye has never been like Ara. Ever. Hawkeye was a cocky showman trained by the circus. He then embraced the superhero role when he joined the Avengers. While sharing a general skill set and gimmick with Ara, Hawkeye became part of a superhero team in the same way that Ara stood out as refusing to. Hawkeye has battled gods. Hawkeye has beat gods. Hawkeye relishes this stuff. This is Hawkeye's home. Hawkeye is a superhero. He isn't superhuman, but he is a superhero. It is why he wound up leading an Avengers team. He is entirely committed to, and he understands, superheroes are needed to combat super villains. Now, what this story appears to be doing is forcing Hawkeye, a square peg, into an Ara story around all. On the surface, that's all this story is. Hawkeye being retrofitted to be more like DC's remake of Ara. I believe, or I want to believe, that the idea wasn't meant to be that. Steve Gerber, is a clever writer. Al Milburn has been involved in so many Hawkeye stories. And then our editor is more than familiar with the character. I think, and I feel an urge to stress when something is my reading or my take on something, I want to believe that this wasn't intended as a weak attempt to pilfer from DC, but a story that was meant to put Hawkeye into that same sort of situation to exemplify why the two characters are so different. It was meant to be putting this completely different but similar appearing character into that type of story and showing what happens when it is Hawkeye, the superhero, instead of Ara, the grounded crusader. The problem is comics are filled with the smallest minds, and following this, our only Hawkeye solo stories will almost always be cribbing from Ara. They will consistently try to force this square peg into that round hole. He will have grounded stories. He will face gritty, realistic crime. He will be a truly lifeless pastiche of Ara without any original stories in him. The best Hawkeye solo series after this is one that instead embraces his history with a supervillain and a superhero team. Then they continue with the Ara facsimile, but insert new, modern, hipster, indie comic comedy into Hawkeye. At points, Hawkeye is so faultily written as a mirror to Ara that he is now the socially conscious hero to the people. And sadly it began here, with a story that didn't make its point clear enough, so forevermore, people only could see Hawkeye through the lens of the longbow hunters. And it's not the only thing in here that future writers and editors will take and demolish with their one-track minds. We are introduced to a new villainess here, a ruthless businesswoman called Lotus. She will go on to feature heavily as a recurring villain, mostly in Wonder Man's solo series. She is an LA entrepreneur with ties to crime. It is later retconned that this is Lady Lotus from The Invaders. Royce Sternum did that, but it was Kurt Busey's idea. And I am okay with that retcon, but then Kurt Busey ran it into the ground with his fucking insipid imaginary war, and yeah, I fucking don't care. Lady Lotus worked because it was never betraying either Lady Lotus or Lotus's appearances. It made sense, and you could reasonably connect the World War II Dragon Lady to the modern day businesswoman. They shared character traits, and neither Lady Lotus or Lotus were in scenarios that didn't make sense for them being the same character. But then Kurt Busey, who cannot let go of anything, has her becoming a fucking supervillain and a giant energy thing that all the heroes have to fight in his made-up war, which is set in between these appearances. Even when I make a video about Hawkeye's character being remoulded into Ara, there's still time to whine about Kurt Busey. The gang, they are called the Stone Perfs. Awful name for a gang. They try to intimidate Hawkeye by dropping off a dead body on the doorstep of the Avengers' West Coast Playboy Mansion. We get cameos here from both Vision and U.S.Agent. Holy continuity placement, Batman. Vision had left the West Coast team at this point. He had moved over to the East Coast one. It is the least of our problems. We'll have many more that make this Vision issue seem insignificant. Now this is one of the bits that maybe speaks to my idea that we're meant to be contrasting Hawkeye and Ara. He goes into Stone Perf's territory looking for a fight, and he is ambushed with gunfire. He is shot. Bullets penetrate his body in 9 different places here, including 2 that are very close to his heart. I have no idea how he survived this, but maybe that is part of the superhero magic that Ara doesn't have. Maybe Hawkeye, he still had some giant man particles in his system that gave him heightened endurance. Oh, pun there. Heightened endurance. The thing is, I love the incorporation of the Avengers. We have them all at the hospital here, and this should be good. Hawkeye means a lot to these guys, and doing a Hawkeye story without them isn't really a Hawkeye story. So let's talk shop. I would say the placement of this needs pushing a whole year later until after West Coast Avengers 68. This covers a lot of the problems, such as Hawkeye and Mockingbird hanging around the team, and then half the characters we have here. I'll go through things though. We have Cheetah. Now one concession is made with Cheetah growling. Cheetah went feral in Jason Byrne's run, and the growling is meant to acknowledge that, I suppose. Which then presents problems with placing this after West Coast Avengers 68, because she is no longer feral by that point. The thing is that Cheetah was shrunken down in West Coast 49. She remains shrunken down until an issue of Avengers Spotlight that comes after this one. She returns to the team after that. So then we have Charlotte Witch. This was released in concurrence with her going evil. So we more or less are forced to put this after that, although she doesn't say anything here, so you could audaciously argue it's when she is being catatonic before she went sexy. Placing it before West Coast 49 would explain Vision, but then we have Iron Man here. Iron Man didn't rejoin the team until 51, which is after Cheetah was shrunken down. Next to Iron Man, we also have the original Human Fire, Miscoloured Air. He joined in issue 50, shortly after Cheetah was shrunk. He will be temporarily deactivated in issue 58, which came out the same month as this issue. During all this, Hawkeye and Mockingbird were not part of the team. U.S.Agent joined in 44, and Hawkeye split in the next issue, and he wouldn't return until 60. Another possibility I considered was straight after Acts of Vegans. That way you have Hawkeye and you have Mockingbird and you can explain away Vision. But we have evil Charlotte Witch in the mix, making that harder to line up to. U.S.Agent and Wonder Man would be off on a side quest with evil Charlotte Witch. We can't pull a Jason Bourne and just say off these characters were never there. I think we have to say that Vision was visiting. That Cheetah's roar was because she is angry over what happened to Hawkeye, and that this story takes place a year after publication, and that future issues of Avengers Spotlight happen before it. There is one small detail, however, that can complement things. I didn't even mention Wonder Man's mullet. Instead, after my nerdy arguments that this story is a continuity clusterfuck, we have my favourite page of the issue and the story. It is a Hawkeye story, but we get some great characterisation of Mockingbird here. She is genuinely concerned about Hawkeye, and they playfully bicker, but do you know how heartsick I have been at the prospect of life without you? It's not good writing. It's almost Christopher Clairvoyant writing. But I appreciate the sentiment and idea behind it, if not the communication. The communication seems the giant obstacle this story has. Steve Englehart split the married couple apart, which I disliked, and not only because it was tied to another Steve Englehart rape plot. Most, actually all, the writers post-Englehart were pushing Hawkeye and Mockingbird back together, and that is really cathartic for me, because they never should have been pulled apart so horribly. This was probably a scroll though. Now comes the other part that screams superhero. This is how Hawkeye thinks to deal with this problem. He turns to Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr., and wants him to make a new, better outfit. And we tease it across a couple of pages. We deliberately don't show Hawkeye. We obscure him from view. And this works for landing a bigger laugh when we do get to see what he has come up with. He looks like a big, fat dork. This is Hawkeye in his exciting battle armour, designed to protect him from gunshots. It's not a very good design from Al Milburn, but I think that it is one that could be interpreted better by other artists. Steve Lightbulb makes it look a tiny bit better on the covers, and then there's Ryan Paul in West Coast Avengers 69. Stop laughing. It's not funny. That is the only other time he wears it. And that is why, if you place this story just after 68th, you have the idea that then, in the next West Coast issue, Hawkeye pops that armoured outfit on for a fight, and then never wears it again because he gets beat badly. I have a lot of feelings on this issue and this story, and they're not all positive. But I really do want to see it from the angle that I think reflects better on the intention behind it. I hate that anyone, let alone credible creators, would go, Ara is doing pretty well, let's copy that. I like some story choices here, nearly all of them Mockingbird related, and so that's the reason I'll string my bow and thwack a 7 thumbs up at it.